very sombre journey, a daughter accompanying her mother from the home of their family in the Highlands.
Through Edinburgh, all those little alleyways and closes, and it's a real haven, or somewhere that tourists flock to, and during festival time, that location is, you can't move, and it's a real centre for celebration as well. It's a real focal point for it.
And now the cortege, as you can see, once again, the pavements are packed with people who have been, no doubt, waiting patiently. This has been a long journey, waiting to get that glimpse. And before we've talked about, it's an almost tranquil moment for them. It feels like a moment of a silence for everybody as they see this cortege pass through.
It's a moment to reflect and have reality dawn. You were asking me earlier about Balmoral, and I can only imagine the emotional anguish that they must have been feeling, and just trying to keep it together to as Ruth Davidson said, to do this right.
Well, King Charles in his national address, drawing on that broadcast from Cape Town that the Queen had made on her 21st birthday back in 1947, whether she promised to devote her life to the Commonwealth, whether it be short or long, and to the services. He said that
I didn't see the sacrifices. I couldn't comment specifically on those. But yes, she lived it. It was palpable in her that she always at the heart of what she wanted was this meeting people, connecting and making that moment of connection with her was well, that never to your like.
Well, he also said in her life of service, we saw that abiding love of tradition, together with that fearless embrace of progress, which make us great as nations. The affection, admiration and respect she inspired became the hallmark of her reign. And today we see that admiration and respect, but we also see the tradition too, which we know the Queen did enjoy.
Yes, and I think that's very, very important to reflect these traditions, and many of them have been seen for the first time, as we saw with the Accession Council yesterday. And it is part of the richness of pageantry, it's part of culture, and I think I can certainly speak to how Scotland's ceremonial events are slightly different to other parts of the country, but they're all distinct. Each of the four nations have a different way of demonstrating their culture and their civic life. Yeah, a small group of Royal Household staff, I believe, also walking up the Royal Mile. It's a very, St Giles is just, I love St Giles. it's slightly not what one might expect.
Things took place outside, so the history of this place is truly fascinating, certainly, but really a strong part of the Reformation which took place in Scotland. And we heard, did we not, in that Accession Council yesterday, the separation of the Church of Scotland and the Church of England, and that King Charles had to swear the independence of the Church of Scotland, which really feels like it is centred on St Giles Cathedral. Yes, and silver melted down and sold to raise money for the redecoration. But more recently, the stained glass window, as a mark to the national bard, Rabbie Burns, added to the cathedral in 1985, and possibly that is what we will see tomorrow. Queen Elizabeth II, in the centre of the Union flag, the children who've come out to witness history. The streets lined, as we have seen in other cities, that the cortege has made its way through Aberdeen, Dundee, and here in Edinburgh, Scotland's capital. He will rest overnight at the Palace of Holyrood House, and members of her household staff will pay their respects to the monarch, for whom many have worked for years. the Earl and Countess of Wessex and their daughter arriving by helicopter to the grounds of the palace, taking part in the events of tomorrow centred on that cathedral we saw on the Royal Mile. King Charles also flying up too, with the Queen Consort, the Prime Minister joining events here in Edinburgh tomorrow.
Close to the centre of town. Very close to the centre of it. I think it'll be Princes Street and then up the Mount.
How hard is this for you to watch?
It is difficult, and you know, we've seen these pictures, but until we perhaps see this over our shoulders here, we might not, I don't think it's sunk in yet, but you know, it's so grateful that so many people along that route have had the opportunity to see her.
The city that she first came to as a crowned queen in 1953, to which she returned almost every year apart from the period of COVID. And it was to the Palace of Holyrood House that she came at 11 o'clock on the 27th of June this year on her final royal visit to the capital of Scotland. Played their part in supporting the Queen's arrival. The Dean Bridge we look down at now, as Her Majesty now crosses Leith Water and comes into the new town. The new town itself was being built and was really an emblem of the revival of so much in Scotland after King George IV had come on his visit in 1822. And it was typical of the Queen that she wanted to mark the 200th anniversary of that visit by King George IV this year. Let's see her cross the bridge. The Queen returning to the city that was the name of the dukedom that King George VI gave her husband when she married him in 1947. And he was Duke of Edinburgh, and she was very proud to be his Duchess of Edinburgh. The fortress where earlier today Lord Lyon, King of Arms, gave the second of two proclamations here in Edinburgh, that Elizabeth II is dead and King Charles III is the new king. And there at the top of the Royal Mile we wait for the Queen's procession to come up and turn towards us. She first of all will skirt around the base of the fortress and come up Johnson Terrace. And only a few weeks ago this area was athrong with the glories of celebration that is the Edinburgh Festival each year, where a profound quantity of youth, creativity and arts and culture come into this royal dukedom, the name of which she carried, and bring it to life. And just up the Castle Hill to the right of the church there, which is now known as the Hub, just up to the right there, the Castle Esplanade, where the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo takes place each year. All that seems a long way away, but the crowds fill now this most ancient of royal processional routes. There is no processional route older than the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, and the great tradition in Scotland was not a procession but a riding, and the lover of equestrian things and horses that the Queen was would probably have seen some delight in her final journey down from the Highlands, ending up passing along where the great ridings of Scottish tradition, right back to when Mary Queen of Scots moved through this ancient city, being shouted at by John Knox. Always there is controversy in a vibrant city, and that is also true today. And the Queen makes her journey come to an end with this route down the Royal Mile. The Queen passes the High Kirk of St Giles, where tomorrow she will lie in state, and also the Mercat Cross, where in 1952 her father, the King's death, was announced and the start of her reign to her proclamation. And today we saw the proclamation of her son, the new King. The cobbled street of this Royal Mile, which will turn into the Canongate shortly, will bring the Queen to the Abbey Strand Gate into the forecourt of Holyrood Palace. Waiting for the late Queen there will be a guard of honour provided by the Royal Regiment of Scotland, and the King's colour will be lowered in salute to the late Queen. No band will play. and when the hearse comes to a halt, the officer commanding the bearer party will move forward, and Her late Majesty will be lifted from the hearse and borne into the palace, along the colonnade inside the courtyard, and then up to the great stair, and the coffin placed in the throne room of a palace that she left only at the end of June earlier this year. Zara Phillips was married. It is so difficult to believe that the sparkly-eyed, happy, enthusiastic, courteous Queen who came on that morning of the 27th of June this year to the very place where she will halt today is returned in this particular manner so soon. But Scotland has welcomed her home. She's passed through this long and interesting journey through the Highlands, and finally we see her come home to her palace, here, beside the Parliament building that was built in her reign, to be received and to rest in private overnight. The bearer party for their Colonel-in-Chief from the Royal Regiment of Scotland prepare to lift their precious burden and carry Her late Majesty into the palace. After more than 70 years as Queen of Scots, Elizabeth II is taken into the palace and will be placed in the throne room, peacefully at rest overnight, before the ceremonies begin tomorrow, and she's taken to the High Kirk of St Giles, where a service of thanksgiving for her life of service to Scotland will take place in the presence of His Majesty the King. The Queen is home. guard of honour with the King's colour taking leave of this sad sight here at Holyrood. So different from when the Queen arrived, and many of these soldiers gave their own salute to the arrival of their Queen. But today they've shown their ultimate respect on the instructions of the new King to the late Queen as they now leave out towards Arthur's Seat and the glorious views that this great palace has of the hills that sit right within the heart of this city, as Scotland has brought home the late Queen from the Highlands here to the heart of Edinburgh. And tomorrow these soldiers will return. They will take their part in escorting the late Queen to the cathedral on the Royal Mile. And following the procession will be His Majesty the King and other members of the royal family. The constables of Holyrood taking their leave also from this scene. And with the courtyard once again empty and the sentry marching out his pace, this sad journey is at an end, and the Queen is at rest in Holyrood.
Well, the High Constables of Holyrood, the last to leave out of the South Gate. With me here, Louise Tate, former Press Secretary to Her Majesty the Queen, and our Royal Correspondent, Rhiannon Mills. And Louise, you watch on. This was your office, of course, was it not? The coffin taken now to the throne room for, the household staff to pay their respects.
Yes, and